Okay, I'm going to talk about closing costs, and this is a topic that's interesting to both buyers and sellers. Specifically, I want to talk about the context of a seller being asked to pay some of the buyer's closing costs and when that's appropriate and when it isn't. Okay, the first thing I want to say is this is a market-driven term. So depending on where you are, depending on your local market conditions, sellers may be asked to pay closing costs often or never or seldom, something like that. So it really depends on your local market, and this is where your local real estate professional is going to be able to help you. And let me just tell you how they go about doing that. The way that they go about doing that is by picking up the phone and calling people who know. There's two people who know about closing costs. Those are the appraisers who are out there appraising properties on a daily basis, and also the listing and selling agents for the houses that have already sold. Okay, so your agent needs to go and get that information. Now with the appraisers, it's very easy, and I'll tell you what I do. I'm always getting calls from appraisers asking me about listings of mine that have sold, and they want to know the condition, how many updates there were. They don't get a chance to go in them, right, after they sell. So they've got some of those questions. They also always ask me, how much did your sellers contribute to the buyer's closing costs? And I'll tell them, okay? But at the same time, I flip that back around on them because I've got an appraiser on the phone who's appraising lots of houses, seeing lots of contracts, certainly more contracts than I'm going to see. And I turn it around on him or her and I say, hey, let me ask you, how many contracts are you seeing where the seller's being asked to pay buyer closing costs? Now here locally in our market of Greater Hampton Roads in Williamsburg, the answer to that is 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10, Brad. Most of them have sellers paying closing costs. And so then my follow-up question to that is, how much? And there was some pushback last summer, and I saw it going down a little bit, but lately they've been telling me 3%. And so if you don't know, 3% for a $250,000 house is probably about how much the actual closing costs are going to be, about $7,500, okay? And these are the loan fees and the prepaids and the first years of homeowners insurance, et cetera, that are not down payment money, but are the closing expenses, settlement expenses for the buyer, okay? The other way that we can find out this information is by picking up the phone and calling the listing agents of the houses that have sold. So for whatever reason, and I don't want to go into it here, but there is some talk about privacy issues, etc. Why this isn't reported in our MLS, frankly, I don't know. I don't agree with it not being reported. I think it should be there. Occasionally it is in there, but very rarely. So what we have to do with the solds is we have to go and call the agents who are involved and ask. So I did this here recently for some sellers of mine who are asking this question, how much closing costs should we be expected to pay? Because I got to tell you, no seller wants to pay any of the buyer's closing costs, particularly if back when they bought, the market was different and the seller didn't pay any of theirs, right? Who wouldn't? But the fact is we have to go with the market conditions. And so I was able to look up, you know, these 4 houses that sold. The best comp for my client's house was a house right around the corner, and it got a certain price, but at that price, the sellers also paid 3% in the closing costs. Now there was one comp where the seller didn't pay any closing costs. I thought this was interesting, but the house sold for $10,000 less than it was asking. So the buyer ended up getting that sort of commensurate amount as a discount, even though they didn't ask for the closing costs. And the specifics on that transaction I was able to learn was that that buyer was a very cash flush buyer and put more than 20% down. So that buyer represents a totally different buyer than, say, our military buyers, which we have a lot of, who are getting a VA loan. They're expecting to be able to buy a house with no money down and the seller to pay all their closing costs. They're expecting to get into a house with little or no money out of pocket. And because these folks, they represent a third of our market, you know, I feel it's important to prepare sellers for that market reality. Anyway, that's all I'm going to share with you on that. It's very important stuff. You want to make sure that you're not overpaying if you don't have to, but you also have to understand that in order to get that top price that you want for your house, if closing costs are part of your market, you're going to have to be paying that in order to get that top price. As always, I am never too busy to help you or your friends with real estate. You can call me or text me at 757-816-2968. Find me online at bradandersongroup.com, and we'll see you next time.